ESRI, the Environmental Systems Research Institute, that I'm on the education team of, we started an education program way back in 1992. So we're still, tapping gently on all the windows and doors after all these years. I wasn't on the team back then, but just so you know that we have a long-term commitment to education. We're all educators actually on the education team. We're either curriculum developers or we've come from a content area. So we're not pushing software. The software is important because it's the means by which students actually engage in climate, energy, population change, natural hazards, other things in their regions, in their communities, in their world. So those tools are important. They're all on the web, though. ArcGIS Online is the primary tool that I'll get into in a moment that we use with schools. And so the nice thing is, opposed to professional development for educators, when I do these K-12 institutes in the past, it was, Joseph, now we got to install software. And even though it was free, it was like, and I got to work with my IT staff and all the rest of those tech barriers that you and I know about with some other tools. That was kind of the way it was. And so consequently, it was, according to that Rogers diffusion of innovations curve, it was just a few teachers, those innovators and early adopters that would actually do this in their classrooms because they're the ones that kind of, spent nights and weekends, right, working on all this and getting it to work. Now, with some of the things that I'm going to show you just in a minute, there's nothing to install. And so as long as they have a web browser, they can use, one computer and one screen. They can have Chromebooks, laptops, whatever, multiple devices in the classroom, any of those modalities work. Plus, it can be taught online or face-to-face or in a hybrid setting. So that's nice. The technical barriers are a lot less than they used to be. However, the main challenge now is, where do I incorporate it in my curriculum? How do I incorporate it? What tools do I use? And so that's one of the things that our team helps your fine educators in your state and elsewhere do is, okay, what do you teach? And what areas in the curriculum are less engaging? Maybe you're using a static a static map in a textbook, and nothing against textbooks from 1990, and the ocean currents are like this big, and you want something engaging and something interactive and something you can add. For example, I'll show, hey, I want to add the current wildfires to a map of New Mexico. How can I do that? That kind of thing, where you're still teaching according to the content standards, but you're doing it in a way that maybe satisfies your educational goals with that lesson or that unit or that course more fully. So that's kind of where we're coming from, is the software is not the main focus. The main focus is, helping educators decide why and how and when and where. And so we're not advocating convert every single lesson into geotechnologies. It's focus on those areas where, again, the students aren't engaged. It's not as local as you want it to be, or somehow the resources are not to your satisfaction. So just so you know, the education team here is, in it for the long term, and I look forward to working with you all. That being said, one of the tools is the Living Atlas of the World. The Living Atlas of the World, as it implies, it is a authoritative body of content that it's not, just stuff on Joseph's computer or my teammates' computers. It's from, New Mexico Department of Natural Resources. It's from the EPA, USGS, where I used to work, Census Bureau, NOAA, et cetera. So it's curated content that not just educators use, but people making decisions about the land and natural hazards and all the rest of it. And one of the things that I love working with educators on are these apps inside the Living Atlas. I'll just show you one of them, the Drought Aware app. So nothing to sign into, but if you have a unit on aridity or water or something like that, every educator does somewhere in the curriculum, such an important issue, right? This changes, right? This gets updated every week or so. And, southern New Mexico right now, okay, let's take a look at that. Those counties, what I liked about this particular one is you can see, okay, at one glance, what the situation is. And then at another glance, you can see, okay, I'm going to zoom into some of these counties and look at, for example, it's not just the physical drought, right? It's also, look at these economic impacts over here. You can see, oh my gosh, in this particular county right here over by Clovis, let's go to that county. There's $480 million in ag. There's $440 million in livestock. There's $9 million in corn. So the economic impacts of a sustained drought, what would that be like? So you've got this that updates periodically. You've got live content, and actually, we're looking pretty good here in Colorado at the moment. But when I showed this when we were teaching in a PD for educators back in the spring, it was not good up here. So how do things change? Why do they change? And what are the cross-curricular, multidisciplinary impacts of these? So that's just one of about 20 of these apps that are in the Living Atlas of the World, which is part of ArcGIS, which is the Esri brand of GIS. So it's kind of like McDonald's. Everything in McDonald's starts with mix something. Everything in the Esri GIS landscape starts with ArcGIS. It's kind of a geeky story as to why it's called ArcGIS. Maybe we could talk about it sometime. But anyway, that is our brand basically of GIS. There's other GISs out there. This is the one that's actually the most heavily used in nonprofits, government, industry, academia, et cetera. So it's a good tool for students to use because they will encounter this in the workplace. That's not the only reason why we think it's valuable for educators. But if I'm teaching about, again, coastal erosion, water chemistry, spectral bands of the Landsat imagery and how ag land or how wildfires affect the landscape, and I want to look at some satellite imagery, this is a great place to start. Another place that some educators start, this is my guideline for educators, like, what is the Living Atlas? All the things I basically went through in 1 minute. This is a story map. And that's a multimedia tool that educators can use, that students can actually create. So this story map kind of guides you through the Living Atlas app. And by the way, this is a picture that I took in an actual high school when I was running a geotech club after school. The point I'm making here is don't get too attached to the tools. The tools change. This is the most important tool, right? Your brain, thinking about asking deep questions, thinking about relationships, patterns across the landscape, which is really what we want them to do. Line for how to use the Living Atlas apps. Okay, another way that educators start is with, and I'm just going to give you 4 or so ways. There's multiple ways that educators start with modern web-based geographic information systems. One is a tool that we've been working on with National Geographic for several years. You might be aware of the old Map Maker Interactive from Nat Geo, and now it's part of the Esri. You can see the URL in tiny font there, but arcgis.com. So it's inside the same platform now as these other tools, which is great. One of the nice things about this is that for educators, if they go to ArcGIS Online, which is where I was a moment ago, and they add world biomes or sea ocean temperature, they're going to get several sources for each one of those layers. One, and choice is nice for some educators, but many educators say, I just want one layer for tectonic plates. Okay, so I'm going to add that. And I want one layer for the earthquakes in the last 30 days, which comes from the USGS here in Golden, Colorado, not too far from me. Okay, so now I've got earthquakes, and I've got, let me scoot the windows around here a little bit. Okay, so I've got the plate boundaries and the earthquakes. Great. So now I've got 2 map layers in here, and you can see how it changed. And okay, I want to change the base map to be something like, how about oceans? Ask the students, hey, why do we care about earthquakes and oceans? And hopefully they'll say, Bill, because of tsunamis. Exactly. So now we've got the last 30 days of earthquakes and the plate boundaries with the different kinds of plate boundaries. Here, if you pop up a legend, it's okay. The plate boundaries are in one red color. If we wanted to change that so that we can see the subduction zones versus the spreading centers versus the transform boundaries, we could do that. But just at one glance, this is why mapping is so powerful. I can see that, oh, okay, in the last 30 days, and every one of these, of course, the G part of GIS is the map. The I part is the information behind the map. The information behind the map. For example, these pop-ups that you've probably seen on other maps. So there's a database behind every single map layer, and that's what gives them their power, so that they can see, oh, okay, there is a 2 there, but I clicked on this other one. There was a 7 about 6 weeks ago-ish, 7 weeks ago in late April. Oh, maybe 9 weeks ago. Anyway, the point is you've got some fairly, you've got real-time data feeds coming from wildfires, earthquakes, tornadoes, real-time weather. We could track the current hurricane off the Gulf of Mexico, et cetera. So if I'm an earth science teacher or a physical geography teacher, I still like my paper map of this dynamic planet that I used to use when I was at USGS, that big, one of those big wall-sized maps. That's still a valuable tool. This is also valuable because you've got some updated, hey, students, I wrote a lesson last year on, there's some earthquakes that happened recently in Turkey. Why did they happen? Why were they so severe? What population was there? So you can actually go to current and compare them to past, in this case, earthquakes. So that is the NatGeo Esri map maker. You can see that I'm not signed into anything. I've got a variety of layers in here, probably about 100 layers. And we want to keep this pretty simple. Each one of these layers, for example, you've got a couple of tools. You can turn them on and off. You can delete them. You can make them transparent. So kind of typical mapping type tools that you can use. And a lot of educators start there. Some educators actually start with these lessons called geo-inquiries. So let's say, hey, Joseph, I don't want to start with the map. I want to start with a lesson on the Trail of Tears or on the Dust Bowl or on land use or something else. So if I go to one of these, let's just take one that's completely different from what we were looking at before. If I'm a English language arts teacher and I want to look at, oh, okay, well, let's take a look at the book To Kill a Mockingbird, and let's take a look at that particular lesson. So if I look at that lesson, every one of these lessons is 2 pages, and they are all tied to one single interactive web map inside this ArcGIS system. So a teacher doesn't have to actually make the map themselves. They can go to the lesson and they can either, and I'll just duplicate this so we can go back to the lesson. They can either use the questions that we pose or say, hey, I don't like your questions. I'm a teacher. I can use my own questions, and they can totally do that. But they're starting with this map, taking a look at just the layers that we put into that particular map. And you can see here, each one of these maps has one or more layers in it. So taking a look at these maps and then using the lesson to interact with the map and look at each one of these variables in here. So that's the point of bringing that up, is that some educators start with these 2-page lessons. That's another way they start.